If you count them all, the United States has about 5 million sheep. That might sound like a lot, but compared to other countries, it's a small flock. China has somewhere between 160 and 170 million, while Australia's numbers hover between 65 and 75 million. The US simply doesn't have the same scale of sheep farming, and one of the biggest reasons comes down to economics. Take Wyoming ranchers as an example. Shearing one sheep costs about 3 times more than the wool can be sold for. With margins that poor, it's no wonder many farmers stopped treating wool as a marketable product. Instead, they've been dumping it into rivers, fields, and floodplains. At first glance, that sounds like a strange way to dispose of a perfectly usable resource, but as we'll see, there's a method to the madness. In some parts of the West, wool is ending up exactly where it can do the most good. The western US has a serious water problem, and it's not just about drought. The glaciers that feed many rivers here are shrinking. High on the mountaintops, these frozen reservoirs once acted like sponges, releasing meltwater slowly and steadily through the warm months. But as they recede, their ability to keep rivers flowing evenly declines. Research on Washington State's Nisqually Glacier and others in the Northwest suggests they might be able to make up for reduced snowmelt until late in this century. After that, river flows will likely become far less reliable. Already, spring runoff is shorter and more intense, sending torrents of water rushing downstream instead of gently soaking into floodplain soils. That problem is compounded by irrigation systems that divert water away from floodplains and into fields via canals and pumps. Without slow, steady flooding, the water table drops and underground aquifers fail to recharge. Instead of lingering in the soil, water races downhill, scouring banks and carrying away tons of sediment. Poor livestock management plays a big role in the decline of western rivers. When cattle graze floodplains year-round, they strip away plant cover and trample the ground, compacting the soil. The U.S. Geological Survey has shown that constant grazing destroys the biological soil crusts formed by lichens, mosses, and cyanobacteria, tiny communities that help stabilize the ground. Without them, loose dirt washes away with the first heavy rain. Dams make matters worse. By trapping water, they stop the seasonal floods that once carried fertile silt and seeds onto the floodplain. Inside the reservoir, sand, clay, and silt settle out. Downstream, the released water is almost sediment-free. And like a blade, it cuts deeper into the riverbed. Channels narrow, banks steepen, and the connection between river and meadow is lost. The western U.S. has thousands of dams, each one altering the natural rhythm of the waterway. And then there's wildfire, another powerful force in this region. Between 1997 and 2020, about 87% of all U.S. wildfire acreage was in the West. California alone lost an average of 1.2 million acres a year from 2012 to 2022. Fires strip floodplains of vegetation, leaving bare, unstable soil that can't absorb water. When rains come, erosion accelerates. The result is a cascade of degradation. Rivers deepen, floodplains dry out, and the plants and animals that depend on these habitats decline. Faced with all these challenges, Western communities have been experimenting with creative fixes, sometimes using resources nobody else wants. Wool, it turns out, can help reverse some of the damage. In Malta, Montana, farmers noticed local creeks had been carved deeper by erosion. The faster flow in spring washed soil downstream and drained the land too quickly. Plant life dwindled, insects and birds disappeared, and the banks kept collapsing. So they built artificial beaver dams, wood structures reinforced with wool mats. The goal was to slow the water down, spreading it across the floodplain the way healthy rivers naturally do. Slower water has more time to soak into the ground, which replenishes aquifers and supports plant growth. The mats and logs also stabilize the banks, physically holding soil in place and preventing further erosion. Part of wool's magic is physical. It can hold 20 to 30 times its own weight in water, acting like a sponge that gradually releases moisture during dry periods. Near wool-reinforced dams, plants stay hydrated longer into the summer. As vegetation rebounds, its roots lock in the soil and create shade, helping keep the water cool for aquatic life. The other part is chemical. Wool is rich in nitrogen, often more than compost or manure, along with phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and iron. Because it's made of keratin protein, it decomposes slowly, sometimes over a year, providing a steady trickle of nutrients that supports long-term plant growth. As water slows behind a wool dam, Fine sediment and organic matter settle out, creating fresh, fertile soil. Seeds trapped in the mix germinate, starting a cycle of regeneration. Over time, even heavily eroded channels can recover their shape and reconnect with the floodplain. Montana farmers have found simpler applications too. In Belgrade, they make filter pillows by stuffing wool into bags and anchoring them in streams. These slow the flow, trap silt and seeds, and steadily release moisture and nutrients. Another innovation is wool pellets, made from low-grade or waste wool that can't be sold for textiles. Pellets are worked into soil, where they absorb and store water, then release it slowly. In riverbank restoration, they help establish vegetation that stabilizes the banks. They can also improve any degraded land, providing an eco-friendly, low-cost alternative to synthetic fertilizers. Wool isn't the only waste material finding new life in river restoration. Every January, after the holidays, used Christmas trees are collected, stripped of decorations, and laid along shorelines. Placed with the trunk upstream and branches fanned out, the trees act like natural barriers, slowing water, trapping sediment, and creating sheltered spots where plants can take root. In Pennsylvania, the Stroud Water Research Center used this technique on tributaries of the Brandywine River, reducing erosion by almost half in a single season. The branches shielded young willows and shrubs, which in turn provided long-term stability. While rivers benefit, Christmas trees are even more widely used on lake and ocean shorelines. At Michigan's Castle Park Reserve Point, they help trap sand and rebuild dunes after storms, performing as well as costly sand fences. In Louisiana, the city of New Orleans has run a Christmas tree drop program for more than 25 years, using thousands of trees each year to reinforce marshes. Bundled trees, sometimes airlifted into position by National Guard helicopters, reduce wave energy, trap silt, and form the foundation for new vegetation. Over time, they've helped restore more than 74 acres of coastal habitat and brought back fish, birds, and shellfish. Another unusual solution comes from coconuts. The coarse fiber left after processing, called coir, can be woven into mats that stabilize shorelines. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation recommends laying coir mats along slopes, securing them with stakes, and planting native vegetation through them. The mats last 2 to 5 years, long enough for plant roots to take hold. They slow runoff, prevent rill formation, and evenly distribute moisture along the bank. As plants grow, their roots weave through the coir, creating a dense natural mesh. Eventually, the mats decompose, leaving behind a self-sustaining, erosion-resistant ecosystem without any synthetic waste. These projects have a few things in common. They reuse materials that might otherwise be burned, dumped, or left to rot. They rely on natural processes, slowing water, trapping sediment, feeding plants, rather than heavy engineering. And they're relatively inexpensive, making them accessible to small communities. The catch? Most remain small-scale, local efforts. Wool in particular is still far from being a mainstream restoration tool. Yet the science and early results suggest it could be a valuable ally in the fight against erosion, drought, and habitat loss. As the West faces a future of less predictable water supplies, restoring the natural relationship between rivers and their floodplains will be essential. Whether it's done with mats of sheep's wool, bundles of evergreens, or fibers from far-off coconut groves, the goal is the same: keep the land connected to its water and the water connected to its land. Because in the end, healthy rivers aren't just about flowing water. They're about the life that flows from it.